Okay, so in this presentation, I'm going to build a web application with a list view, a detail view. We're going to be using a templating engine. We're going to have the ability to insert items and also delete items as well. So it's going to be close to what would be a CRUD application. And in order to do this, what we're going to do is I'm going to create an app that's called Express Demo, and I'm going to go into it. Okay? Now, right off the bat, if I want to build a web application, Express is the go-to framework for, or go-to module for building applications. There's some other ones too, but this is definitely the best known. It's built on top of some, everything has to be built on some other module. These are built on top of other modules, a module called the HTTP module, which actually goes and creates a server. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say Npm Install Express. Well, let me actually do this first. I apologize. Npm init y, which will take all the default settings. And if I do an ls, I'll see I have this package JSON file. I'm going to Npm Install Express, and I'm going to save it. Standard operating procedure for an Express application is that your application starts by having a file called server, okay? Because, again, this is going to be an Express server that we create. So I'm going to create this file server.js, okay? By the way, if I go and type in node server or even server.js or node server, no error, but nothing happens. It's just an empty file. Let me go over here. Let me open up my editor, and we'll start building this out. So I'm going to go into this file. So just to show you, if I say console.log, hello, and I go back here, and I do node server, I'll see hello show up on the screen. Notice it doesn't wait around there. It doesn't wait around there because it's done and nothing else happens. Now, one of the things that I want to do, and I actually have this installed globally, which most people usually do, because you're usually only using it in your development environment, is something called nodemon. So what nodemon does is that it listens for file changes. So, and I think you could also say which. If I say which nodemon, I think it'll tell me that this is installed globally. And if you don't install it, it's just an npm install nodemon, and it'll end up installing. And what I'm going to do, if I said instead nodemon server, it'll run and it'll sit there so that every time that I go in here, this will go back. And this has nothing to do with Express, but this is basically just allows me to keep on running this command. Now, what I want to do is I want to create an Express app. And I'm going to use the module system Express ended up getting installed. So I'm going to go over here and I'll say constant Express equals require Express. And if I want to create an Express application, it's simply app equals Express. And if I do that, nothing really will change. The Express app ended up getting created. Now, in order to use Express, Express is a server. Servers have to listen. And servers need a port to listen on. Okay? So, in other words, we're just going to be running this locally. This, by default, is going to be running on this machine. And we're going to specify the port we need to get to this machine. As an example, if I go over to my machine here, and I go to Chrome, and I attempt to go to localhost 3000. And I enter, I'll see this site can't be reached. But if I go back over here, and I say, hey, look, Express app, I want to really bring you to life here. I want you to listen, okay? I want you to listen on port 3000. I want to show you two different things here. When I end up doing this, this is going to restart. It's saying that it's starting the server. And believe it or not, if I go and I reload this page, I get a different error. Okay? So it knows that it's a server, but it knows that it doesn't have any configuration to specify what happens when I go to slash. By the way, I don't have to go to slash. I could go to whatever I want to. I could go to foo. Can't get to foo. Can't get to bar. Can't get to anything. Okay? Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to allow my application to get to another page. What I want to do is Express is made up of routes. So how do you create a route? Well, routes have different adjectives based upon what you're trying to do. Routes are based on the language of HTML, which is a protocol. Okay? You can make GET requests. You can make POST requests. You can make delete requests. You can make PUT requests. You can make patch requests. PUT requests and patch requests are similar. There's something subtly different about them. And when I finally figure that out, I'll let you know what it is. But I haven't figured it out in a while, so I'm not sure I will. What I want to do here is I want to do a GET. So how do I do this? I'm going to do a GET. And I just want to show you something that's going to be a little bit different here. GET ends up taking a callback. Okay? And I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to go back to my GET and hit Enter. Okay? Notice I see the old message up here, and I'm just spinning around. If I opened up my DevTools here, I would see, if I reload this, I'm just going to be spinning around. Still have the bar that's there. Let me go back in here. Hit Enter. And you'll see that I'm just pending and pending and pending and pending. And the reason why I'm pending is that the server is waiting there. And the server is waiting for requests. If I gave you my IP address, you could make a request here too. I can make a request here too. Okay? And what happens is that these are callbacks. It's like when a button gets clicked on. What do we do? Okay? Well, what do we get here? What comes in here? What's the signature here? Again, we don't call this callback. Express is looking to see what the request is that comes in. And if the request matches slash, which in this case it does, still hanging, okay? When the request ends up matching, it calls this function. It's up to me to handle the response, okay? So I'm going to go in here, and there's 3 parameters that go here. Request, response, and there's also something called next, okay? If I take my response, and I send the string hello, and I go back to this other page, I will see hello. Okay? So what happened there? Well, Express allows you to define routes. Okay? You can get information about the request. What might be in a request? Well, someone might have some URL parameters that they send you. Request has a lot of things that go to it. Not all that much that we might be interested in, but if I go to my developer tools and I go and look at this request, I could go and look at the headers, and if I was interested, I could go and look and take a look at these request headers. If I cared, I could look and see what kind of browser the user was sending. Okay? But there's a request, and there's also a response. And if I go over here, I can see that that response was the word hello. Okay? I could change it if I want to and do something else. And go back over here, and now it's going to be goodbye. Okay? Now we call this the Express pipeline. Okay? So for instance, there's nothing wrong with me doing this. And I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to reload this page. Okay? 2 routes. And I'm going to be sitting here forever. Reason why you sit here forever, and you might be familiar with this term by now, is this is a pipeline. Okay? So I end up coming into the pipeline because I match this request. Express is nice enough to send me to that first callback method. And I didn't do anything. Okay? It's up to me to do something. There's really anything I can do here if I want to. I could come over here and say console.log first route. And go back over here and reload the page. Still nothing, but if I go back to my console, I'll see that I did hit that with first route. Okay? So my console.log here, that's the other thing, is that Express is running over here. Okay? Even if I wasn't using NodeMon, all NodeMon is doing is restarting things. Okay? All NodeMon does is it runs node server again when any file changes. Okay? But even if I wasn't using NodeMon, I would still be sitting up here and I would be able to see this console.log because this is where this task is running. And this task is not done until either there's an error, right, or I end up closing this down. So what I'm getting at here is that I'm dead in the water. What do you think could make me go from this first route to this second route? Take a guess.
Next.
Sure. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to call next. And now I'm back in business. Okay? The point that I'm getting at here, Express is a series of middleware. Okay? Each of these callback functions that have that signature have the same signature. So, by the way, does that signature feel sort of familiar? It's a little bit different than what we looked at before. The pipeline is a little bit different. If you wanted to pass something, you can end up passing something by putting it on the response. There's some other ways to pass things down. But you can imagine if you had a web application and you wanted to do logging, one of the things you might want to do is you might want to do logging for every single request, in which case Express gives us something else. Express says, hey, look, for every request, let's do use, and we'll say console.log request. Let's see if there's a URL property. First route, let's reload this. So we see our URL is /. Okay? The point that I'm getting at here is that this is middleware. If I don't put that next in there, I'm dead in the water. Okay? It's up to me to do it. Why? Well, maybe I'm going to go get something from the database, and I don't want to move down in the chain until I end up doing it. Okay? So Express has a pipeline. All right, just like when we did the bash shell, it has a pipeline. Now, let's start to build this out a little bit. And the way that we're going to build this out is that we're going to have a request that goes to get, and we're also going to have another one that goes to products. In fact, if I go back over here and I change this to products, and I go back in my URL bar, I'll see that I ended up going to products. Okay? Now, if you were going to go, and by the way, there would be nothing that would prevent me from going in here and doing something like this. And let me go back here and reload. And that's just HTML that I'm sending down. My browser understands HTML, so that's fine. That'll work. Okay? If I wanted to be annoying to people, I could go in here and maybe put a script tag in. Okay? Doesn't make a lot of sense. The point that I'm getting at here is that you can imagine if we had to sit here and if we had to go and put all of our HTML in here, we would go nuts in a hurry. Okay? We don't have to, because every web framework has templating engines that they end up using. Okay? We're going to use a templating engine called Swig. It's got 3 or 4 things we have to use. Okay? Sometimes I forget which ones they are myself, but I'm going to modify something, and I'm going to specify, hey, look, if this is the home page, my response also has the ability to render, and I'm going to tell it to render index. I could let me just throw one more thing out at you. Another thing that I could also do is I could say response send file, in which case what I could do is have a file somewhere on my system. Let's just say for the sake of argument, I have in my file system, I'm going to use this module called path, which I'll show you. And let me just show you how this is going to end up working. I'm going to use this later anyway, so I'm going to grab it. All path does, have you ever had to go and concatenate file paths together? It's a bit of a drag to do. This variable dir name gives you the current directory. If I do console.log here, dir name, and I look at my console, this gives me the absolute path to where my file is running. So all I'm doing here is I'm specifying, hey, look, send the file. I'm assuming that there's going to be a folder in here called views with a file called index.html. There's not. So if I go back to my path here and I go to rerun this, okay, I actually get an error. The error says, hey, look, I tried to find this file, and this file doesn't exist. And I could go over here, and I could add a views folder, and I could add an index.html file. And within that HTML file, I could put in some valid HTML. I could put a head in here. I could put a body in here. I could put my H1. And if I go back here and I rerun this, it'll now end up finding that file. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. We could use something like that. Okay? So send file will go and actually go and find the file and send the file to us. By the way, if we wanted to, what do you think? I'll ask this question. What do you think is happening under the hood with this send file? What do you think it's really doing?
Really quick. The views is just the name of the folder, right?
Correct.
It's not like some thing. So what I think it's doing is it's just doing a read file to the file, put in a string,
And the callback that it's coming up with, right, is that it's going to send whatever text it gets back from the file down to the browser. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. The problem is if we do that, and we can do the same thing over here with products, and I'll go over here and call this products, and I'm going to go over here and I'll go here and I'll say this is going to be products, and this will be home. And if I go over here, I've got home and I've got products. And nothing would really prevent me from going in here to both of these and putting some sort of unordered list. Maybe a list item here. And I could have an A with an href slash home. And I could go over here and do one for products. And if I did that, this would be on my home page. So if I went back, I'd be able to click on home. I'd be able to click on products. But of course, I'd be sort of dead in the water there, which you don't want to have with an application. So I could take this and I could stick this in my products file, in which case I can go to products and I could go to home. And I built a little mini website, right? Not a ton of code that's happening here, right? Setting up my application. I'm not even using this. I could take this out. Got even less lines that we have. An Express application that's listening with two different routes. Now, one of the things that I might want to do is that I might want to send some data down to products, might want to send some data back to home, and frankly, this is kind of annoying that I've got to have this duplicate code on every page. It's where a templating engine comes in. So I'm going to install this templating engine. I'm going to kill this, and I'm going to say npm install swig. And let's actually also make this a little bit more interesting here so that when we end up going to our package JSON file, instead of actually going in and having to run nodemon, let's do a start, and I'm going to say start dev because I'm really starting in my development environment. And I'm going to say nodemon server. And now if I go over here and I say npm run start dev, I'll be in the same spot that I was before. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that maybe you have something else running on your machine, and maybe it's running on port 3000. It would be great if we could run this and pass in the port number, so that we could modify the port number, we could change it, okay? We don't have to necessarily hard code it. Magic numbers are not great to have. So it'd be nice if we could sort of set the port. What's nice too is that the port is going to be set if we go to deploy somewhere. Heroku, that's where we could deploy to. DigitalOcean, all these places have their own port numbers, okay? So one of the things we could do here, and I'll do this in different pieces, I could put in before this command, port equals 3001, okay? Now you could ask, how do I end up getting at that value? By the way, when we make a change like that, we've got to go and restart this because, again, we need to run that command again. It doesn't start automatically. And you could see that this is being called, right, with port 3001, but how do we get at that? Well, if we go to our server and I do console.log, I could say, tell me the process environment. Tell me a little bit about the environment that I'm in. Okay? So there's sort of a magic global value called process, and there's an environment that has some built-in values set up. That'll automatically rerun, and I'll see a lot of stuff here. Okay? A lot of keys here, big map, and if we scroll down, we could see our nice little port. Okay? One thing you'll notice about these ports, and this is commonly the case when you just have keys and values, the assumption is that these keys are always strings. Always. Okay? Values, in this case, are all strings because, again, it's not like we're specifying that it's an integer or something else. So let's go in here, and instead of doing this, let's change this out a little bit. And I'm going to create a constant called port, and I'll say, hey, look, if you pass me the port, I'm going to use it. Otherwise, yeah, I'm going to use 3000. And I'm going to go and put the port here. And what's nice about this listen method is that it comes with a callback. And when I hit that callback, I'm going to say console.log. And I'll use my backticks, and I'll say listening on port. And I'll put in the port. Just in case you forgot which port it was that you should be going to, it'll end up showing up here. And if I go and look at this again, I'll see that I'm listening on port 3001. If I went back here, this will give me nothing. But if I go to 3001, I'll end up getting to this. Okay? So, you have a question? Yeah, I mean, I'm setting the port, yeah, because this could go on for a while, so I just want to be, just if you keep track of them, that would be great. Okay, I'm setting it here. Setting the port here, I've got access to the port through my environment variables. By the way, I could set whatever environment variable I want, just to beat a dead horse a little bit. Let me go over here and say foo equals bar. Okay, these are separated out by spaces. And now, again, I've got to restart. So if I go over here, as an aside, if I go over here, console.log, process, environment, foo, okay, even though my server ended up restarting, okay, it's still looking at the old package JSON files. So let me go back and run it again. And now you can see bar.
Very quickly, is it beyond the scope of this presentation to understand why you picked any port or why one port is better than the other?
I think I'm awful at networking, so I know that 3001 is a valid port. There's probably some limit to what ports you could use. There are probably some that are reserved.
Does this relate to all of that stuff, and is it not in the scope of this presentation?
I don't think it's in the scope of this presentation.
Fine.
All right. So, and I don't have a good answer for you, so that's two reasons. So let's go over here. Let's take this out. And I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this because I don't need it. Again, all I'm getting at here, I know this might be killing you a little bit, but every time you modify your package JSON file, you really have to rerun this command. So now that I do this, let's go in and let's start putting in swig. Swig equals require swig. Okay? And actually, let's do something a little bit different. Instead of saying response send file, I'm going to say response render because template engines render. Okay? And I'm going to say I want you to render the index here. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say I want you to render products here. And I'll go over here and I'll go back here and I'll go try to rerun this. And I'll get a different error message. And it says, you got a little problem because you told me to render something, and render means that you have some render engine that's set up and you never defined a render engine. Okay? There's two things I need to do to set up a render engine. One of them is to specify, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to specify that my app engine, I always forget if this is engine or engines, okay? So I'm going to actually set this by saying app set, this is called the view engine, okay? Now all this is going to do is that when I put an index here, it's going to look for an extension of HTML, but also it's going to look for an engine to process it, which doesn't exist yet. So if I just did this, it's actually two things I need to do. If I just did this, okay, now I actually have defined an engine, but I've said use the HTML engine, but I haven't said what the HTML engine is. Okay, this is where swig comes in. Again, I always get this wrong, whether it's engine or engines. I'm going to say the HTML engine is swig has a method called render file, and that's the engine that I want to use. So swig is going to take a file and some data and create some HTML. Now, if I have this syntax right, this won't blow up. Swig is not defined. Let me just put swig back in. Okay. And it's not engines, it's engine. Okay. So 50% chance. And believe me, if I didn't get this, I don't expect you to. Okay. Now this actually is working. And if I go back here, I can get products. And if I render products, I should be in business with products. And I'm sort of in the same spot that I'm in. I just want to show you one thing. Let's say that I go over here to my index and I decide to do this. Nothing. Okay? Well, swig thinks it's doing you a favor, but this is one of those favors that if you have hair, would make you pull your hair out. Swig actually caches your templates. If I went and restarted my server, by the way, if I killed this and restarted it, I would probably see this. But again, if I go back, and actually this is worth noting, is that NodeMon, by default, only listens for changes in JavaScript files. Okay? When it sees a JavaScript file that changes, you notice it didn't change here? And you notice I'm still looking at my old template. So swig has one other command. And what this is swig set defaults, and you give it an object, cache is false. Believe me, at some point, you're going to use swig, and you're going to forget to do this, and you're going to wonder why you're not getting your changes. Now, if I do this, I'll see every time that I make a change to my swig file, that change will be reflected. Okay? Now, swig gives you a fair amount of functionality. Let me show you one thing that it's going to do. I'm going to go over here to my server, and when I render my index file, I'm going to pass some data. So let's just be clear about what template engines do. template engines take data and templates and turn them into HTML. Now, we didn't pass any data, so our template's not really going to be doing all that much work. But if I go and pass some data here and specify, hey, look, foo is going to be the string bar in my index, and I go over here, now you might think that maybe I could just type foo here, in which case I'm just going to get the word foo. Okay? Maybe you could think I could do it another way. Well, you have to know the syntax of the templating engine. Swig's templating engine says if you have data and you want to display it dynamically, you could do that, and now I see bar. Let's be very, very clear. This is very important. What I end up getting back from the server, I'm not going to see anything about foo here. I just see the value bar. All the processing that happens with Swig happens on the server. Okay? Swig basically takes your data that you pass to it if you have data and your file, and Swig will give you some HTML. The other thing that Swig does is it allows us to make things somewhat uniform. So right now on both these pages, I have all this stuff here. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all this stuff and I'm going to put this in a file. I could name this anything I want to, but by default, it's usually called layout. And what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to take this stuff off, and I'm going to go to, by the way, this will have no bearing on anything right now, but if I go to my index page, I'm going to get rid of all this stuff, and I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to use some other Swig. So Swig, when you want to, when you just want to output something, it's the double braces. But here, I want to specify, hey, look, this page is extending layout.html. I'm going to do it here, and I'm going to do it on my products too. And now, if I reload this, I get this, but it's not a very exciting page. Okay? So all template engines give you the ability to have layout, okay? But also these layout pages give you the ability to specify areas where you're going to put in some content. So with Swig, you specify a name of where your content area is. And these are actually done with a block, and we call this block content, and we have to give it an end too, end block. You don't like the syntax? Don't blame it on me. Swig syntax. No one really uses Swig except Full Stack Academy. Okay, there's other templating engines that we use, but this is going to work fine for us.
So if you have more than one, do you have to put an ID on there?
Not an ID. If we had more than one, we could go over here and do, content 1, content A, content B, but we'll just use one. It's easy enough. That's the ID, right? So content is not any kind of reserved word, block is. Okay? So if I go over here and I go to my index page, now I could go over here and use the same syntax and say, here's my block of content, and Swig is going to ask us to end this block, so we'll end it. And I'm going to go over here and put in H1, home. And just so I don't have to copy myself here, I'm going to go to my products page and put in products. So now I've got home and I've got products, and they're using the same template engine. Okay. So this gives you a little rough estimate about how Express uses templates. You'll see here amount of lines of code, even with some white space, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 lines of code. Okay? First time that you type it, you'll struggle through it a little bit. These things, I've done this about 1,000 times. I still get mixed up a little bit. But just remember, you have to set a default engine, and you have to specify what that engine's supposed to do. And it's a Swig render file that's doing the work. Okay? Now, what I want to do here is I would like to have my code look a little bit nicer. Luckily, there's a library that's out there called Bootstrap. and I'm going to grab Bootstrap. I'm going to say npm install Bootstrap, and I'm going to save it. Okay, because again, if I do this on Git, I don't want to stick my node modules folder in. What this does is that now underneath my modules folder, I'll see Bootstrap. And by the way, if I go into Bootstrap, and I go into dist, and I go into CSS, I'll see that I have a file. The problem is that I want to serve that file. I want that file to come out as a static file. And I'm going to be very optimistic, and I'm going to go over to my layout page. And I'm going to put a link tag here. You have to do this with a style sheet. You have to say it's a style sheet. And I'm going to put an href in here to tell it where this style sheet is coming from. And I'm going to say, hey, look, I want to prefix anything that's coming from that node modules folder into something called vendor. It's my right. I could do whatever I want to. It's my site. And under Bootstrap, we saw that there was a dist. We saw there was a CSS folder. And there was a bootstrap.css. And I'm going to close that link. And I'm going to reload this page. And I'll see that, first of all, I got to run my site again. And I'll go back here. And I'll see that it's not able to get this page. What I want to do is set up what in Express is known as a static route. What that does is it says to Express, hey, look, Express, if this file exists on the system, in the file system, just send it back. Okay? And the way that I'm going to do this is with a piece of middleware in Express. Okay? Middleware is a fancy way of having a function that looks like this. I don't want to have to, by the way, I could write my own middleware and say, hey, look, if you request vendor and bootstrap and all this stuff, read that file and send it back. But I want to do it in an easier way because there might be other files that I want to get from that system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say app I want you to use. And Express, and what I'm going to say is, hey, look, if anyone comes in here with the prefix of vendor, okay, I want you to go and I want you to find, if you could find the file in express.static, directory name, node modules. Okay? And I did this actually incorrectly. I need to put in my path.join. I always remember that because I always remember there's 3 parentheses there. So what this says, what this does is this places a piece of middleware. I guarantee you something. I guarantee you that if you ended up looking, and you could look and see what Express static gets you back, I guarantee you it's going to give you back a function. Okay? We know that function calls are capable of returning function calls. Okay? Express.static gives us a function call, and I guarantee you if you look in that function call, what it's going to end up doing is it's going to say, hey, look, I'm going to look for in that path, okay, and I'm going to see if I can find that file, and if I end up finding the file, I'm going to serve it. And if I run that, what I should get is a nicer looking list, okay? You're going to write a lot of routes, but again, static routes, fairly simple. Give it a prefix, okay? So again, any request that comes in, let's be clear about this, any request that comes in with this will be impacted by that static route, okay? And I said to that static route, hey, look in the node modules folder. So it's going to look in the node modules folder because that's where the way that I sort of like to think about this, I've mounted that static route as a server of files. I've mounted this node modules folder. So if you come in with /vendor, anything after this, it'll look in here. So for instance, if I go up to my command line and I go in here and I say vendor, bootstrap, dist, CSS, bootstrap.css, I'll get my bootstrap file. Because that's where it's living. It's living there, right? So what I want to do here is let's just put a little CSS here. And I'm going to, these are some things you don't have to memorize. You'll learn them eventually. I'm going to do container because bootstrap is basically just a CSS file that has some nice styling for us. I think you'll agree with that in a second. So for instance, I'm going to go over here, give myself a little room on either side. And also, Bootstrap has this idea of navigation. So I'm going to give this a class of nav tabs. And now I'll get this nice bar right here on the top with home and products. Okay? Now, the next thing that I want to do here is I want to build this out a little bit. So one of the things that's going to happen is that not only do I want to show my products, which I'm going to do here, but I also want to go and show some product details as well. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make up something that doesn't exist right now. I'm going to pretend that there is a database, and I could find that database in, again, this is my file, and a file called required.db. Okay? With CommonJS, if it can't find the file, it'll throw an exception, and I'll go in and I'll create that. db.js. That error will end up going away. Again, CommonJS, we use the module.exports. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 products. ID of 1. What's a good name? No, come on, don't be silly. Food, right? What's another good name? Yes, yes, very good. And one more? Oh, God, you guys have been studying. Okay, so now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say module.exports, and I'm going to export this object. And when you ask for products, I'm just going to return this array of products. And what I'm going to do over here is when I go into my server, I'm going to go over here, and I could pass data here, and I'll specify, hey, look, when this comes in, products are going to be my DB products. And if I end up doing that, what this is going to allow me to do is now if I go to my products view, and for instance, I went over here and I said products.length, I should see the number 3. Now, I want to loop over those products. So one of the other things that template engines give you is the ability to loop over things. So I'm going to create an unordered list. I want to have them nicely formatted. Again, you don't have to memorize this, but it makes it easier for me to look at these things. And I'm going to I'm going to repeat over my products. So template engines are different, how they loop. But Swig has a for, and I could say for product in products. This allows me to loop. Whenever you have a loop, you have to end your loop. Again, I didn't write the engine. Don't complain to me. And I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to output the product's name. Now you can imagine this could be coming from a database as well. Now I've got my products, and I forgot one thing, just to make it look nice. I'm going to give this a class of list group item. Okay? Now I've got 3 products. Now I said I was going to do a detail view here as well. So let's pretend that there's a path, an href for / products. How might you get to a product? By the ID. So I'm going to use Swig. Again, Swig is rendered. Any of the Swig stuff you see here, this is stuff that's going to be rendered, and this is not correct. I'm going to need to put my li here. So I've got this href within this product. Now if I go here, these will look like links. Unfortunately, when I click on them, I get nowhere. Okay? Well, let's go back and create a path for this. So what I want to do now is I want to create a route for the details of a product. Okay? This is a very common routing mechanism. This is actually called Restful Routes. Okay? List of products is / products. A product is / products with the ID of the product. There's some identifier. Well, I'm going to pass an identifier. I don't want to hard code this as 1. I want to pass in an ID. So what Express allows you to do is to put in what you could call a wildcard. Okay? It says, hey, look, someone's going to call this. They're going to call this with an ID, and I'm going to get access to this. And in this case, I only want one product. So I'm going to say to my database, hey, database, do me a favor. Get product. Okay? And how do I get that ID? Well, Express is nice enough that in this request object that we haven't used yet, it gives us a params property. Those are parameters. They're called parameters. And it allows us to get them by name. If I called this foo, it would be request params foo. I'm not going to call it foo. I'm going to call it ID. And I'm going to call get product to get a product. Now, just to sort of get us to the right spot, if I do that, it'll give me an error message. It tells me it doesn't know how to get product. So let's fix that. Let's go back to our DB. You can imagine this could be in a database. Get product is going to be a function. I'm passing in an ID. Now keep in mind that the ID that I pass in, just like the process environment values, it doesn't turn it into an integer. Okay? So I'm going to want to turn it into an integer. And I'm going to simply say, look, when you ask for products, take the products, filter them, look at the product. This is some ES6 stuff, which is fine to use. And the product that I want you to send me back is the product that has the ID. And I'm going to take my ID, and just to make sure that it's an integer, I'll multiply it by 1. Filter gives you an array. Okay? And I'm being very, very optimistic here that the ID that I pass on it is the correct ID. And again, I'm able to do this on one line because if I don't put anything else here, this will actually return whatever this value gives me back. If I wanted to put it on 2 lines, that's totally legit. And I would just have to go here, in which case now I'm commanded to actually put in the return, and you could do that as well. Now when I go to run this, and I go to products, and I go here, okay? It's showing up here, but I'm not really getting anything from it. You notice I lost all my products. And really, if you look at your server, the problem is that I really don't want to go to products. I want to go to product. So it's not even a lot of work here. If I wanted to go here, just to show you again, product.html, I want to use the same library, so I'm going to go over here. I'll say extends./layout.html. And I'm going to go over here, and I'll say block content and block. And I'm going to go over here, and I'll put in another div. Bootstrap gives me this idea of a well. So it'll give me a nice dark background. Then I'll just go over here and put in product.name. So if I end up doing that, now here's my individual product, and I could go to bar, and I could go to Baz, and I've got a detail view, but it would be nice if I could go back, and that's real simple. I'm just going to put an A here with an href, back to products, and I'll just put in all products, and then I can go back again. I'm just using my HTML to get to my routes, so I go here, products, and let's see, I'm not within my content block, so it just gets ignored. I did that on purpose. So now I could go back, and I've got a little bit of navigation. Okay, now let's start to think about something. Let's just think for a moment. Let's make sure this is still working. And let me heed my own advice by specifying git init, git.add. Git.commit. First commit, way too late. Right? Should have done it earlier, right? So let's go over here and let's just think about something for a second. You could imagine we could have a bunch of routes with products, and this file is going to get pretty big pretty fast. So Express allows us to do something. What Express allows us to do is to basically do something like this. App use, and we're going to say if anything comes in with products, okay, let's actually move this to another file, and I'm going to move it to routes.products. Now the only way, and I'm going to comment this out for a moment, the only way that this works, and Express is going to try to set up its pipeline, but the only way that this works, if I go back here, I'll get an error. First of all, it'll tell me, hey, look, it can't find products. And I'll go back over here. So I'm putting this stuff, and this is common. Routes, products.js, and it'll find it this time. But if I go back here, it'll say, and I didn't want to do app.user, I want to do app.use. Sorry about that. And if I do that, it'll tell me, hey, look, you got a little bit of a problem because really what I'm looking for is a router. I want you to tell me how to route if someone goes into /products. The same way you told me how to route if someone comes in with /vendor, okay? I want you to tell me how to route with /products. It really makes it very easy to use. In fact, I'm going to take this code that I have here, and I'm going to pull it out of here, and I'm going to put it right here. Now, of course, these modules are all separate. Doesn't know what app is. And I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say, well, app is actually, and I'm going to require Express, and Express gives me the ability to create a router, okay? And this is valid. If I go over here, the only thing that I need to do is module.exports equals app, okay? This doesn't conflict with app in the other file. The way that you could think about this is that this is sort of a mini application. And by the way, since I said that I'm going to be using this router for /products, I could go in here and take out the products in both of these. Now what I've done effectively is I've created a route for /products and for /products with the ID. Now, if I go back here, I'm going to run into a little bit of a problem. And the problem that I'm going to run into is that I didn't remember to bring my DB into this file. So if I go back, and probably in its more rightful place, I'll go back here and just put this in. And now I've run into a little problem because, in fact, my DB is now one level up, right? So if you have files in different directories, just go up one level, grab that DB file here. Everyone can sort of see. When you do require, you're in the file that you're requiring from. I got to go up one level. Now I can get my DB. Now I'm going to be back in business. Okay. So I'm going to do one other thing here because I think it's going to be kind of helpful. What I want to do is that on my products page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a form. So I'm going to put in this form, and I'm going to say the method for my form is going to be post. And when I go to post, the action is going to be /products. So this form, when it gets submitted, is going to do a post to products. Now, right now we have two routes for products. We have a get with /products. We have a get with /products and an ID. We have no post. So if I was to go over here and put in a button and give it a type of submit, I'm going to give it a class of button primary. It's going to be a nice, pretty blue button. I'm going to say save. And if I go back here and reload this and I click on the save button, I'll get an error message that I can't post to products. Well, again, these routes handle a couple of different verbs, and there's nothing that prevents us from saying, hey, look, not when posting, but when going to /. And again, we mounted this on /products. So if I just put in request, response, next, and I'll go over here and I'll say response.send, I'll say to do, add a product. So if I do this again, it'll say add a product. By the way, if I refresh, right, it'll keep on going to that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in logic to go in and add a product. Well, one of the things I could do here is if I go back to my views and I go to products, I'm going to put in a div here just so I have a little bit of room. This is again, this is all bootstrap stuff that I know because I've written this code about 1,000 times. And I'll put an input here, class of form control. I'm going to give this a name of name because I want this to be the name of my product that's going in here. And I'll give it a placeholder of name dash dash dash. And if I go back here to this page and I put in a product, I want to grab that product. Well, the way that I can grab that product is that, again, all this stuff is isolated inside products, which is good. When a request comes in, you could grab the request as a body. In fact, if you want to see the request body, if I go back over here to my tools, you see I did a post here? If I look at my headers and I scroll down, you'll see that I passed in some form data, URL encoded, with the name DDD. So I'm going to try to get at that value by just sort of echoing it back. Now if I go back here, I'm going to go in here and I'll put this in here. Notice I don't see anything. No request body. The reason why I don't see a request body is that Express doesn't assume that it knows how the data is coming in the request body. There are different ways that data can come in. This happens to be form data, okay, that's coming in as form data. If you actually looked at it in its raw form, it actually looks, if I view the source, it actually is just name value pairs, okay? If I had some other data, I could pass that in as well. So I've got to tell Express that I want it to handle this. Well, unfortunately, you need another module. The module that I need is something called body parser. Very common, every app is going to have it. You're going to use some kind of body parser. And body parser is, again, a piece of middleware. Okay, Express is made up of middleware. And over here, I'm going to specify, hey, look, app, I want you to use, I'm going to go up here, and I'll say body parser, and notice I can require it, it's in the node modules folder, body parser. Now, I want it to handle form-encoded data because I can make requests other ways. I can make a request with JSON data or any other formatted data that I want. So what I have to do is I have to tell Express that I want you to use body parser, and I've got to be a little bit more descriptive with this, or else it'll bark at me a little bit. Let's just see. Let me do it without it and see if I get this error. So I wanted to use body parser. If I call that function, I go back and I start this. Yeah, it gives me a little error that I should provide the extended option. So let's go over here. See if we get that error message to go away. What exactly does that mean? Oh, you know what? It's barking at me for this reason. So body parser, and I actually need to be a little bit more descriptive, URL encoded. Okay, so there's different types of body parsers that are there. I want to use the URL encoded one, and I'll see that message go away. What does extended do? Well, I'll give you the same answer that I'll give you about patch and put, not quite sure. But I think if you have deeper structures of encoded data, it can handle those deeper nested structures. And I'll tell you how important it is, because I really don't know what the answer is, so I'm not using it all that often, or ever. So now if I end up going back here, and I go back here, and I do this, and now I click on this, I see, lo and behold, I get an object back. So let's go back and now use that information to go inside here with our products. And what we're going to do here is we're going to tell our DB, hey, look, DB, do me a favor. Insert a product. We're going to pass in the request.body. And in fact, after we do this, this is a very common pattern, is that we don't want to just sit here. We want to tell our request. Now, when you end up posting data, the way that it's done in a standard way is that you do a post, and then you do a redirect to a get. So you post your data. You ever have an annoying thing where you refresh a page and it says, do you want to post the data again? Do you want to post the data again in the browser? That's because they don't do that. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to say response, redirect, and here we're just going to redirect back to product so we can see our shiny new product. In this case, if I reload this, I'll see that insert product doesn't exist, and we'll go over here and we'll end up rewriting this. So I'm going to go to my DB, and I'm going to say insert product. This is stuff that you've actually seen before, believe it or not. And simply what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find my max ID by looking at my products, reducing them, memo, max, start off with 0. And I'll go in here, and actually this is going to be not products, but products. And I actually want to call this max instead of memo. And this is going to be my product. So the max is sort of our running total. And I'll go over here. If I just ended up returning max from this, this would always be 0, which I don't want it to be. But I'll say, hey, look, if the product's ID that I'm looping over is greater than max, then I'm going to reset the max to the product ID. And then once I get out of here, I'll say product.id equals plus plus max ID, increase it by 1, and go into our products array and push my new product. In which case, if I do that, product is not defined because, yes, because here this is using, no, that looked right. Product is not defined.
Product, yeah, you don't have you have product.
Line 17.
Line 17, thank you. Product is not defined.
No.
Oh, thank you. This is going to be products, and it's going to be the underscore. Thanks, I got it. Thank you very much. Now I could go in here, and I could add products. Notice the page refreshes. So here I actually lied to you. I'm not going to end up doing the delete, which we could end up doing. By the way, if we did the delete, unfortunately, we would need one other module, which is called the method override module, but I'm going to leave that one for the workshop. What you could see here, we've ended up building from scratch an Express application. Let me stop this recording.